volunteered at a muscular dystrophy camp, and now I'm involved in Camp for Adults with Muscular Dystrophy for over 50 years. Sorry. I was actually a part of the production staff when Angie auditioned. So I've been around a little longer than Angie has.
Just a little bit.
Just a little. Okay, so the realities of this topic may make some of you feel uncomfortable. Imagine this being a part of your everyday life. We're not here to make anyone feel uncomfortable, especially guests. They come here to escape reality. You have the power to leave an impression and make memories. They can be good or bad and stick with someone the rest of their lives. Not all special needs are of a physical nature. So picture this. Up here, 1960, a one-room schoolhouse, one teacher in charge of kindergartners, first and second graders. An outgoing 5-year-old girl is constantly talking to the boy next to her and being sent to sit in the cloakroom. There shows a little bit age there. One October day, the teacher gets frustrated and makes the girl go sit on a high stool in front of the entire class. As if that wasn't embarrassing enough, she tapes the girl's mouth shut. The lasting memory was of crying and my mouth hurting. It wasn't until years later, my mother told me that afternoon parents were calling her because their children came home and told them that the teacher had backhanded me across the mouth and I was bleeding. I didn't remember that part, only crying and my mouth hurt. This is a memory that changed my life and created a fear of being the center of attention and authority figures. The outgrowing girl became withdrawn. Festival has helped me on some of these fears. That same teacher established a positive memory that has affected my life. One day we had to draw a character from our reading book. She held up my drawing and said that I was an artist. I paid attention to details and drew fingers and ears on Dick. I may not have become a public speaker, but I was encouraged through this memory to pursue art. Keep in mind, your actions and words can create lasting memories for those you encounter. And my question here was, how many of you know and have had experience with someone with special needs? Okay. Does anybody want to share a little?
I work as a behavioral technician and I provide one-on-one therapy to kids with autism.
My uncle has Down syndrome and all of my friends are autistic.
I actually drive kids to and from school that are mostly on the spectrum.
I worked with young adults with disabilities, ranging from different ones, in order to help them enter into the workforce.
Okay.
I myself am a disability. I have ADHD and probably autism, and I've also worked with the elderly with memory care and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
One more, yeah.
I actually, in my career, I was a bus nurse for the special needs bus. So I had to learn quite a few different interventions, including suctioning somebody, if someone's having a seizure, doing a magnet across, as well as significant interactions with geriatrics, specifically those with dementia.
Yeah, and I'm interested in knowing some of that because I want to make sure I'm not just preaching to the choir, that you guys, so if I'm repeating something, so how many of you are left-handed? Okay. Society has ingrained in us to view those who are not like the majority as others. There are a multitude of first-person accounts of left-handedness being treated as a disability during the medieval period. Left-handedness has a long history of being considered inferior. Roman culture was superstitious, and left-handedness was associated with bad things. When Christianity became the dominant religion, some things stuck around among the culture. In the Middle Ages, the Holy Inquisition considered the left-handed population to be the product of the devil or witches. say they were persecuted, imprisoned, and even burned at the stake. Up to the mid-20th century in the United States, some sociologists and psychologists theorized that left-handedness was associated with stubbornness and criminality. In fact, even today, some cultures consider the left hand to be dirty. Left-handedness has been discouraged as recently as the mid-20th century. At times, physical restraints have been used, often involving school pupils having one hand tied behind their back until they learned to use the right hand. Society wanted them to be normal. Sounds rather petty and much ado about nothing, doesn't it? People that have to rely on devices to correct physical abnormalities are often viewed as lesser. We have been conditioned to think that way. I grew up with the idea that if you needed to wear glasses, you weren't pretty. I walked around the first part of high school half blind for the sake of vanity, but also with the phrase, boys don't make passes at girls who wear glasses. Sounds ridiculous, right? But think about this. How many times in entertainment have you seen that when a woman takes off her glasses and lets her hair down, she is perceived as more seductive? Aside from wardrobe, what is the visible difference between Clark Kent and Superman? Wearing glasses presents the idea that he's weaker, imperfect. How ridiculous is it we view those with quality of life, whose quality of Christ is improved by the invention of corrective lenses as someone lesser? Okay, so, for some people in a wheelchair, and for some people, wheelchair is an object that most have no other option than to be seen in it. This should not make them an automatic target. Not all attention is welcome attention. Have you ever had to use crutches? Other than the sheer inconvenience, did you have to brace yourself for comments and constantly having to explain what happened to you? Someone bound to a wheelchair faces that challenge every time they encounter strangers. Sit down in a wheelchair and suddenly you are different, simply by having to rely on the assistance of a device that helps you gain mobility. In the Middle Ages, you would have been confined to a tower or bedroom if you were allowed to live. When you encounter someone in a wheelchair, it's certain things to be aware of. And Angie touched base on a few of these things, but bear with me, okay. If you see someone in a wheelchair, don't automatically zero in on them and see them as a mark. Contrary to popular belief, most patrons in wheelchairs do not appreciate being singled out any more than many patrons. And this is something I'm adding from a friend of my son's that has dystrophy. He wrote out, first and foremost, the absolute last thing anyone with a disability wants is to be treated any different than any other average human being. We don't want to be talked to like we're an adorable 7-year-old. We don't want to be patronized, and we don't want people making any kinds of assumptions about us, period. If you approach someone and they avert their eyes, that's a good indicator they don't want to play. And that's taught all the way around. A good approach is a simple greeting. If they respond or make eye contact, they are letting you into their bubble. Just never too close. If they are dressed as royalty or in costume, chances are they want the attention, even if it's just a compliment. If you are curious about their disability, show interest in them and ask if it's okay to ask questions. Most of the time, they won't mind and would like to educate you. Choose your marks carefully. How often would you appreciate someone asking about why you wear glasses? Be creative and not predictable with endowments. Their disability is already obvious. You should always challenge yourself to be clever and stay away from the obvious personally physical things. You may think you're being original. How many times have you heard the cliche? Or have they heard the cliche? And then I usually open up to any ideas or remarks that anybody else has heard.
I heard one, it's a bit, I guess it's nitpicky, but when it comes to people, wheelchair users, I've heard is a term that I just heard it somewhere when talking about somebody in a wheelchair, rather than saying somebody bound to a wheelchair. I guess it doesn't apply to talking to somebody, but.
That they're bound?
Yeah, instead of saying that, there's a wheelchair user because it's their tool that they're using, and it doesn't give off that disability sort of vibe.
Right. So what I've got is physical appearance comments should be left to compliments.
Yes.
You may think it's clever to attempt using old English terms and try to sound period, but don't refer to them as a cripple or talk about their chariot. They are here to escape reality and don't need a daily reminder they have a handicap. They already know. Wanted to say something? Okay. Of course, there are exceptions. Some people with special needs may lead a very isolated life and have limited social encounters. You'll have to be the judge of which type of personality you are dealing with. You may approach someone who lights up at your interactions and you are now their best friend. You've made their day. You may cross paths later in the day on your way to a show. You may even remember their name. But what do you do if you acknowledge them and you find your new BFF wants to talk? How do you graciously continue on your way if you're on your way to a show? Any? Sam?
So, one thing you can do is, oh, my lady, it's so great to see you, but pardon me, I must be away.
Yeah, something simple. Because, like, my brother doesn't have dystrophy, but my brother does have some cognitive problems. And he would find his way up on stage and try to take pictures of people and stuff if they talked to him. And I was like, okay. Okay. Okay, if there's a group of patrons, obviously with someone in a wheelchair, don't single out the person in the chair. Acknowledge the whole group. Okay, so we're moving on to, once again, a little bit about my brother was using a walker and he went into a doctor's office for an exam, new doctor. He's sitting over here, I'm sitting over here taking notes. The doctor walks in, talks to me, says, can he talk? So I look over at him, I'm like, Donnie, can you talk? And then, you know, he talks, and then the doctor's like, well, can he walk? And I'm like, he's using a walker, you know? So it is insulting to, you know, acknowledge or not acknowledge the person that's, you know, you're supposed to be, or you should be talking to. So, and you already demonstrated from perspective, sitting in a chair and having someone behind them and talking directly to the person. Okay. Never automatically assume if they are with another person that that person standing behind them is an older sibling or a caretaker. They could actually have friends that came to festival with them. So if you're passing by a show or hawking for a show and see a situation where someone is standing in front of someone in a wheelchair, blocking their view, act like a goodwill ambassador of our village and kindly and quietly ask the person blocking the view to be mindful of the person sitting behind them. Or if possible, escort them to a better area for seating if they wish and without making a scene. And then I wanted to talk about dignity because I am becoming more aware of preserving people's dignity. And this is also a quote from my friend, or my son's friend, that things that bother him. He's like, here's some examples of things that are just triggering. Folks in grocery stores who talk to a handicapped guy like he can't understand words unless you're in their face and overly aggressive. If you wish to speak to someone in a wheelchair, please avoid kneeling down or bending at the knees to speak to them. It comes across as condescending. So that's to answer your one question. If you can sit down beside them, or if that's not an option, you may squat or take a knee. Always stand in front of them when speaking. It may be awkward for them to try to turn their head, unless, you know, if I can see that I'm sitting next to you and you actually can turn your head, then, you know, that's the preferred way if you got the time to sit down and talk to somebody. Avoid at all costs automatically speaking to them loudly and slowly unless the situation calls for it. They are more likely to have a decent vocabulary and you appear foolish, speaking to them as if you would a small child. Okay, these were new ones that Sean's friend gave me. People who overtly flirt to the point of being uncomfortable with a handicapped person because they think they are being nice and that person doesn't know any better. He says, trust me, they do. Folks getting mad when a handicapped person parks in a handicapped spot and walks out of the car to the building. Okay, people assuming a physical handicap of some sort means that there must be diminished mental capacity. Don't assume anything, just as you want people assuming things about you. Just because they can't speak doesn't mean they can't hear or understand every word you're saying. Don't assume everyone in a wheelchair that their mind is also handicapped. Just because a person's legs don't function normally doesn't mean their brain is slow. Never assume that if someone is small and in a wheelchair that they are young. Stay away from cliche remarks such as, nice ride. These are for people in wheelchairs. There's a special limit, is there a special speed limit for that? Slow down. And especially, never say, I wish I had one of those. Think about that one real carefully. Do you really want to be in their situation? And another friend told me, I've got a few of them, that referring to someone with a disability as a hero or an inspiration really gets under their skin. So there's a proper time, I guess, and a place for that. But you know, most of them are like trying to get along with their normal lives. So, okay. So once again, Sean's friend. I'm going to cite an example here. I went to Los Angeles a couple years ago. My dear friend Virgil Brewer took me everywhere. This particular person could walk on his own, but he had muscular dystrophy. Now that's a lot of walking for me. I tried to tough it out because I'm stubborn, but it became too hard. Eventually I had to say something and we had to slow down and take breaks. He looked me dead in the face and apologized profusely. He then said, I keep forgetting you're handicapped. I just see all you do and it just doesn't register with me most of the time. I'll tell you what, that was the greatest thing anyone could say at times like that. That meant more than any apology ever could. He saw me as just a human being, not some crippled guy. That's what most of us want every day. We don't want to be coddled. We don't want to be told we can't do something when it comes to our physical abilities. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be treated with dignity and respect. Get a feel for the personality of the person in front of you before including them in a bid. It's not necessary to walk on eggshells. Interact with them as you would any other person. They are there to enjoy themselves. Forget about the chair. It's no different than riding around in a car to get around. Consent and respect. And this is where, once again, Angie kind of touched on this. But one of the annoying things one of my friends said is, pat him on the head. And it's like, remember the rules of consent. Gain permission, eye contact, body language. Before touching a person in a wheelchair, consider if you would find it unacceptable for a total stranger to touch you that way. So, did anybody have any other suggestions on how to get permission, or I can just go on? Okay. Once again, so this is where, my bifocals are off, so if I start to stumble a little, that's just because my eyes won't let me see. I'm with Angie right now. Okay, so I don't know that I want you doing the one part.
Okay.
Carson, come here and sit on the floor with your legs put in front of you. Sit back. No, straight in front of you.
So scoot back
Sit
a little
back.
bit.
All right.
Like that. Perfect.
Yeah. Now, pretend that he's fallen,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to help him up. The first impulse for somebody is probably to try to grab onto him,
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
let me help you.
and that's, yeah, and that doesn't work. We've had a few people that I have a friend with a prosthetic leg, and she falls, and people automatically come and try to grab her. So what do you have to do to get up? You kind of position yourself, and so you know what you need.
Yeah.
And that's what my point is you know what you need. Now, Tim, if you're sitting down.
I can.
Yes. And you're having trouble getting up. Carson, you've had the class before, you know how. Once again, it's 1 o'clock.
First Saturday of the month.
First Saturday of the month. We might have to wait for, maybe we can do it real quick. So, if Tim's somebody who's having trouble getting up, and you want to help him, once again, you can't come and grab onto him. And to maintain his dignity, you can offer an arm
If you want help.
in the front.
I would love help. Thank you.
And that's the simplest way to help somebody up. Same thing if they've fallen and they get themselves in a position, you ask them what you can do to help, or if you can do something to help. I don't think I've ever done this at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, no. We're on time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we still need Carson up, or are we set?
I think we're set.
All right. Thank you, Carson.
We can remain seated. Same thing, you saw Tim helping Angie when she was having trouble getting up and down the stairs. Okay. If you see someone in a wheelchair struggling to get up or down a hill or stuck in the mud, you may offer to help, but only if you are absolutely sure you are up to the task and know what you are doing. So if you're pulling a wheelchair out of the mud, you want to make sure that you're not pushing them forward so that you actually might dump them out of the chair and make things worse. But if they need help, because it can get muddy out here.
Wow, that's a long siren.
Yeah, well.
Wanna make sure you can hear the
works.
Okay, so going to touch on, once again, respecting others' property. Beware of removable parts on a manual wheelchair. The armrests can pull up if you're trying to help, or the footrests come off.
Some of the handles for the wheelchairs, if you twist them the right way, they'll buckle in on you.
I
Just
can't
for
hear you over the siren.
For some of the wheelchairs on the handles for pushing in the back, they also have pulled-in handlebars as well. So that's a new one that I've seen going around. Hope my grandma
Yeah,
would do
things
that.
to be aware of. You know, like I said, if you, hopefully you kind of have an idea of what you're doing when you go to help and don't hurt more than hinder. Okay, think of the chair as an extension of their body. When you lean on the handle grips, you jostle the person. Much like someone kicking your seat in a movie theater. Because that's something I had to learn the hard way working with my friends at camp and leaning up against their chair or something and getting told, would you stop that? If they're driving an electric wheelchair, be aware of the controller joystick and don't touch or lean against it. One of you could get hurt, or both of you could get hurt. Consent has many forms. Consent applies to medical equipment also. If someone seems reluctant to interact, remember, no means no. I think of this as the Santa syndrome. How many times have you seen a parent try to push a child into a situation? Once again, as a character, some of you might have already run into that where you've got a reluctant kid and the parent is trying to make them interact with you. And I don't know if you've ever run into that.
I have. So when I've encountered that, because it does happen where the kid does feel like it's a lot going on here. There's a lot of stimuli, and it's natural for a lot of kids to just like kind of not want to do things. So in that case, my go-to is always listen to the child. If the child does not want to interact, I always go out of my effort, and this is an occasion where getting down to their level is appropriate because they are a child. So I try to get down to their level, and I try to always like engage and say, "My lord or my lady, this is your day. You do not have to do anything that you do not wish to do."
Maybe feel uncomfortable.
Exactly. If you feel uncomfortable, you do what you need to do. And I always like to try to talk to the child first to get them reassured, and then I go to the adults and say like, this is a happy day. We don't want like to force the children if they're not feeling comfortable. And most of the time, the parents will be understanding at that point, because they also don't want to make a scene. They want their kid to be comfortable too. If you just give them that permission that they don't have to have that interaction, the adults will then take that as like, okay, this is not something that needs to happen.
Right, and if Bob were here, and I'm think maybe we need Bob to have Santa story time at some point when Bob joins us again, because Bob's a Santa, and
Don't tempt me.
he has some interesting stories. Okay, in the end,
Carson had something real quick.
oh,
I was just being peasant dancers for 3 years, especially around the maypole. We got that a lot of kids that's like, hey, I don't want to do this, and the parents like, no, come on, and we're like, it's to the point of like, I'm not gonna give them the ribbons because they don't want to be here.
Yeah.
So it was almost easier to like see it and refuse than going, I don't think they want to. It's like,
Yeah.
they don't want to. No. Because they see, oh, pretty colors.
If I may, because my experience, Mandy and we get a lot of, oh, there are the king and queen. You're going to get a picture with the king and queen. So I have a little bit of a different experience on that. Maybe this is just me. Absolutely. The main theme there is I am not going to pressure anyone who is a hostage in this situation and does not want to be there. But from experience, I feel like I unfortunately have had a bit more of the, no, my kid's gonna do this. So for me, I've tried to develop a little bit of a, hey, you are great and you are just fine the way you are and how you're feeling is so valid, but we're not doing this, right? And that usually has gotten the hint, as opposed to, I feel like sometimes I talk to the kid and the parent was like, oh no, because normally if you're, not to judge anyone too harshly, but I'm going to do a little bit, if the person who is pushing and already not aware of the feelings that are happening, they probably kind of already have a bit of a, this is not a one-off. They don't really register their little person's feelings in general. So just, for me, it's to keep it kind of both ways has been helpful. That's my 2 cents, but.
No, that's a great idea, and that's part of the thing that we're also trying to teach of keeping everyone in the group as a part of the communication. So sometimes it works of talking to the kid first and then the adult, but then in Joel's experience, it's talking to both of them, making sure that they're both included and letting them both know that this is what the situation is and this is how it's going to be handled. And it can be different for everyone. So it's going to be something that you're going to learn out here.
yeah, because not everything is set in stone, because everybody's certain, that's what we're talking about, is everybody has different feelings and circumstances, and we don't know what's going on the other side of them. So what I've got from Sean's friend, in the end, most of us just want everyone to trust that we know what we need. we don't want anyone to assume anything about us. If some action you are considering would make you uncomfortable, if roles were reversed, then it would make others uncomfortable too, handicapped or not. I guess I just want the world to think about those things. People with special needs and seniors are not second-class citizens, because that's what I'm running into now. Since during auditions I had a birthday, and then I'm finding people are treating me like I'm older, even though, yeah, and it's like, okay, I was this way the day before, and then the day after, if somebody finds out my age, then they're beginning to treat me a little differently, and I'm like, I don't know that I like that, because my brain is still the same.
There was a period of time during high school where I was in a wheelchair for a couple days, and I relate to that so much because, like, we were down in Florida because my marching band was marching in Disney, and it was crazy how people would treat me before I was in the wheelchair, and then after I was in the wheelchair, they treated me like I was a completely different person.
Well, if anybody's ever had like a broken arm or anything, I had a broken nose. I didn't realize till I went to camp how many times somebody ended up touching my nose. I'm like, you know, you're not aware, or maybe, you know, that's it, to be a little more aware of some of your motions.
It was also really difficult because I wasn't in the wheelchair for very long, and it was like only during that trip. But so many people thought I was doing it just for attention. When I couldn't walk, it was painful. I was in constant tears because of it. And I actually got verbally harassed by a couple of my peers because of this. And it was just so odd that you would treat
Right, and
somebody
that's
like
why
that.
I'll get to yours in a minute, but what I was gonna say is that's why if we can lighten up out here, you know, and like, just keep in mind that everybody's coming through the gate more or less to have a good time, or for us to give them good memories to go out with and not create lasting bad memories.
I was just gonna say, one of the, I guess, disabilities that's very much on the rise is anxiety, depression. At least the awareness of it. I personally have severe anxiety, actually, and so when it comes to interacting with those individuals, it's a different approach. It can't be big and, you know, what, like, the big personalities many of us have. Sometimes it's just that quiet approach and recognizing panic attack versus just being.
Well, that's, yeah, once again, that's why this is more special needs, because I want to be beyond physical disabilities.
Just made me think of a point. I have trauma. Who doesn't? And these days, right? And so, thing I realized last year coming to Bear, don't startle people. Don't sneak up on people. Yeah, don't do that. But I was in one of the shops, and it was like they sold like magic potions, and some dude like whipped it at the floor next to me, and like I had to leave. Like I was almost crying, and I felt, you know, I'm not stupid for this, but I felt stupid because like all of a sudden, yeah, I was just like I was like looking around. I was like suspicious of everyone that worked there, and it like really put a damper on my day. And I didn't think about it until you mentioned extreme anxiety.
Well, even with those who are on the spectrum,
Also,
you know, that's actually a big factor as well. Is there's so much stimulus going
Yes,
on.
and then somebody throwing something. I thought I knocked something down, and therefore I was running through, am I in trouble? Did I break something? Do I have to buy something I can't afford? Or like, did I do something wrong? And this guy's like pinging me by throwing stuff at me, like, am I missing a social cue? And like, yeah, I just shut down, and it sucked. So,
Well, and at times, like, if anybody feels overwhelmed or starting to, you know, that's why we have safe spaces. That's why you can come and sit in the back of my booth, or you can go to places, because we want to take care of each other.
exactly. So just something to think about when dealing with people.
I just was thinking, I mean, the biggest thing is, I know we all have a job to do and we're very focused on our job that we have to do, is just reading people's body language, being aware, because if they don't respond, back away, because they're trying to avoid. Or, you know, you can tell when people are bringing you in versus pushing you off, I think, in general.
Yeah. And that's a great thing to know, is being aware of other people. And when I say this, I'm referring to not just our guests that we have, but also our other cast members. Because like a lot of people have anxiety or depression or a lot of like things and a lot of stimuli out here that can trigger a lot of responses like that. So us being aware of what each other's needs are in regards to that, in addition to our guests, will help us support each other and help us support our guests. Jen, you had something.
Yeah, within the cast, being aware of what you're saying to your cast members, I think just doubling back on that. We've had experiences where you're making jokes or comments about your cast members in character or out that might make your cast members uncomfortable, and they might address that with you privately. And don't take it as offense. Don't take it as like, oh, I hate you. Just be like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And make amends and move on. Just don't dump it down. Don't keep making the joke just because you think it's funny.
So yeah, that's a lot of stuff that Joel and Barbara are going to be going over in their class. So do you have quarter after? Do you have anything else you need to say, Sue, before we move on? Fantastic. All right. Straight out of Sue's mouth. I will take that. All right. One more thing, Sam.
We had a few people ask if we could take a quick privy break.
Yes.
Just wasn't sure if you
We
heard
can
that.
absolutely take. This is the best time for a privy break. Everyone